Were you expecting something? We're so happy to see you here. Thank you for coming out to the Evening Anthem Vesper series for Chattanooga First. I was unable to be here 2 weeks ago when we had the first one for the second half of this year's season, but very happy to be here this evening and looking forward to a very informational, very exciting report from Mongolia. All of the members of the team, if I understand correctly, basically were from here. And so we're looking forward to hearing and seeing what it is that program was all about. Let's begin with a couple of songs for our program this evening. First one is 457. I Love to Tell the Story, 457. We'll do 1, 2, and 4. Our second song will be one that I think fits in very nicely with the mission theme for this evening, 373, Seeking the Lost, 373. Do all three stanzas.
Come unto me.
At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to our pastor, Dale Tennell.
Did you have a good Sabbath? Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings you bestow upon us. What a wonderful today it has been spending time with you. Thank you for the gift of Sabbath. Thank you for the fellowship that we can have together. We ask for your presence to be here with us this evening as we talk and share stories of missions. We ask, Lord, that you would grace us with your presence. May the words that are shared this evening be inspiring to us to realize there are still people that need to hear the good news of salvation. Thank you, Lord, for answering this prayer. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. As most of you know, some of you may not know, but Mongolia is a place that is very close to my heart. Or maybe I should put it differently. My heart is very close to Mongolia. I think I left it there. We left Mongolia 11 years ago, and we had been working there for 8 years prior to that, and it was a joy working there, and it's a joy to go back every time we go back. And this year, It Is Written invited us to go back because they had some projects going on there. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen tonight. I told Elder Bradshaw he could have 3 minutes to introduce the program. That sounds fair, doesn't it? And then some of the folks that have gone are going to share some stories. Denise Trepanier went to Mongolia last year with It Is Written. And then Dolly Hawking went this year, and Cheryl and I went this year. And then we're going to let John Bradshaw close things out and tell how it all concluded. So it's not that I was just going to give him 3 minutes, and we were just using his name to get you here tonight. But he's been used in worse ways. So, John Bradshaw and the It Is Written team have been going to Mongolia for... Come on up, John, and talk and share a little bit about what It Is Written has been doing there.
Oh.
There you go. Now you're on.
Well, this is one of these ones you actually have to turn on for it to be on. All right. You know, I don't remember anything about 3 minutes, but I'm intrigued that he felt necessary to slip that in here. That was a message. That doesn't matter. He who laughs last laughs longest. So if I can just get up here for the last laugh, I'll be okay. As a matter of fact, I'll share this with you. Pastor Tennell said to me this morning, "Do you have slides?" I said, "Oh, I have slides. I have pictures." And before I was, just before we got in the car to drive here, I said, "Let me look at that again." And I was clicking through, and it went, pah. And you may, I'm not getting into the details with you. You may think, how does that happen? Ask Bill Gates. Because against my better judgment, I was using a Microsoft product. And my several dozen slides and my one video that you really had to see is now gone. So maybe we'll get something back, and maybe we won't. If we don't, it'll be probably better. But anyhow, several years ago, our evangelism director, Pastor Yves Monnier, we were at a convention someplace. Might have been the General Conference. No, it was further back than that. And we met Pastor Tennell's successor, or his successor's successor, as it might be. The gentleman who was the president of the Mongolian mission, a Brazilian fellow named Albert Kuhn. And as Pastor Monnier and Pastor Kuhn spoke, it became evident that there was a great need and an opportunity for a significant mission project, rather than just going and conducting an evangelistic meeting, which has been done, and which has been done with good results. We believed that we wanted to do something that was a little more lasting, slightly more organic. and something that would be more than just a reaping series, something that would be seed sowing and nurturing. And we believe that God led us to a medical missionary evangelism project that would culminate ultimately in evangelistic meetings. But on the way to those meetings, and better yet, beyond those meetings, there would be souls saved. And so a 3-year evangelism plan was hatched. It would involve 2 major medical missionary trips. Interesting, this time I didn't go on the first medical missionary journey, but when we were there for the second trip just a couple of months ago, we met people who had come to faith in Christ through the work done in that first missionary trip. That was very exciting. In between time, too, just before we went, the Fountain View Academy students went and did a tremendous amount of groundwork. And as a result of their ministry, when we got there were people ready to be baptized. So we're very thankful for what God did. The intent was to do something longer lasting, something that would dig a little bit deeper, something that the Mongolian mission could wrap its arms around, that would assist directly with their ministry and mission, and would contribute to the life of the church after the project was done. And so was born Mission Mongolia. We are grateful that the Tunnels were here in our backyard, or perhaps we were here in theirs, and with their experience, they could be part of this journey. The first medical missionary trip, a year or 2 ago, we had 60+ medical missionaries on that journey. That was wonderful. And then this, was it May? I'm thinking it was May. 120+ medical missionaries, 85 or so of whom were medical professionals, split up into a number of different groups, so that this time we had, I'm sorry, I know the 3 minutes, but I have to do this. We had vision teams, dental teams, OBGYN care, psychiatry, careful what you say, psychiatry, surgery, we had surgical teams. When I say vision teams, we had optometry and ophthalmology, so there were eye surgeons there this time. We had nurses and nurse practitioners and physicians' assistants, and a whole array of services that were being provided at multiple locations around Mongolia's rather unplanned capital city, Ulaanbaatar. Ulaanbaatar planned for a population of 500,000. Now there is 1.5 million people crammed into its precincts and spilling over the edges. So a lot was going on in a lot of different places. Logistically, this was a challenge, but thank God we were working with the Mongolian mission. Very good people, very well organized, very professionally run, so this was going to go well. I'll tell you more about some of the logistical challenges. If they are not covered by the others, perhaps they will be. But that was Mission Mongolia. It was a large undertaking, and through this project, God blessed immensely. Pastor.
I thought I sent a slide to Pastor, and I actually thought it got lost, and I didn't know that it was there. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. You can push it. I'll touch it, and it's liable to break. I have 3 experiences, and I will alter some things that I have written down. I went on a 2016 mission trip, as it was said. The 3 experiences that I have was from outreach, the health clinic, and the evening meetings, which we call Jesus Talks. And the very first Sabbath I was there, and my hope is just to plant a seed and inspire you guys. And the oldest lady that was on a mission trip with us when I went was 74, 75 years old, and the youngest was, I think, 8 or 9. So it's definitely for everyone. The very first Sabbath, that I was there, we went to Amazing Grace Church for a church and fellowship dinner, and afterwards they had a outreach. And that's when we went out into the community with flyers to personally invite people to the clinic, to the free clinics and the evening meetings that were going to be going on. So we divided into groups, and I remember this elderly gentleman. He just took the lead. He had a pep in his step and a smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and we couldn't really communicate, but he would take us by the arm and he would lead us. And he gave flyers and invited people on the streets. We went and knocked on doors. We went into a local pharmacy, and I just love it because they're not constrained by time, it seems like, quite as much. And so we just waited until the pharmacist was available so he can personally invite this man to the health clinics and to the meetings and give him the flyers. And we went to a police station. There was no one there, so we just left a flyer. And what really stuck with me was there was no shyness. There was no fear of rejection. He just displayed enthusiasm and love for God and for his community. And all I can think of is, wow, this is the very first day. It just overwhelmed me. It was just something to really just behold. My next encounter that was really awesome was a clinic. I worked in vision, but at the time that I went, we didn't have ophthalmology and the surgeons. We had a kink in all of that, so that didn't quite get there. So we did reading glasses, which the people were so thankful for reading glasses that we toss here and there and we can't find them and we don't think twice about them. It was like, go to them. And afterwards, we prayed with people at the clinic. No one that I knew of rejected the prayer. But the thing that stuck out about the clinic was there was this 92-year-old woman and her son who came to the clinic, her grown son, and we had an interpreter. And she said that people look like trees. And what she meant was that she can see the outline of people, but she couldn't distinguish facial features. And I'm thinking, oh boy, she sounds like she's pretty much legally blind. I can't help her. I have nothing for this lady. And I'm sure the God was saying, oh, ye of little faith. So I gave her the strongest pair of glasses that we had, and there was silence for a while, and her son bent down by her to talk to her. And this big smile came on her face, and she said to the interpreter, for the first time in many years, her son had eyes. And I know normally with reading glasses, you can't see distances, but once he got close, she was able to make out his facial feature for the first time in years. And here I am thinking, what can be done with reading glasses? And I forgot that I serve an awesome, big, loving God. We prayed, we thanked God, we praised him. And my thought on that is that God had used a simple pair of reading glasses to put faces on trees. Go to the next slide first. This little boy was outside one of the clinics, and he caught my heart because all the kids were playing, and for some reason, I don't speak Mongolian, of course, he was kind of ousted off to the side, and he was looking sad. And I tried to communicate with him and tried to get him to understand, and there was nothing, so I put up my camera. He understood the camera, and I was able to get that picture of him smiling. And so he's just really dear to my heart. This last experience that I want to share with you was a story that was particularly had an impact on me. And I know Mary Ann is here. I think it would really impact her also, along with others who pray, Pastor. It happened during the Jesus talk. This particular topic on this night was the great controversy. The church was filled. They had people standing around the walls of the church. They had people in little children chairs on the aisles. And it was pretty much like any other night. Children were with their parents sitting on their laps. Nothing out the ordinary. That is until the speaker got to a particular point in his topic on the great controversy between Christ and Satan. And we noticed, another volunteer and I, who was sitting next to each other, that the noise level started rising. The children were starting, the babies were starting to cry. Toddlers were whining and not being comforted. Mothers were trying to comfort them as they didn't want bottles, they didn't want pacifiers. There's something wrong with this picture. So we decided to start praying. And we began praying, and after a while, the noise level started coming down, and it was quiet. And it was so much quiet that I did sometimes what I do in my life. When the crisis is over and the calm is there, I lose focus. And I started listening to this sermon that I have heard through countless pastors before, but a story that we still like to hear. But I lost focus and I stopped praying. The noise level started coming back up after a while. The children started getting restless again. And then I knew what was happening beyond a doubt. There was a struggle and there was a fight going on, a spiritual fight in that church that night. So we started praying again. And this time it took a little longer for things to settle down, but it did settle down, and you were able to hear the speaker give his presentation. But this time I dared not stop praying until the series was completely over, until the meeting was over completely. You know, I had heard, I can't say I read, but I have heard that evil angels many times agitate children at church and other places of speaking at crucial points so that the parents are distracted and will miss an important point that they need to hear. This particular night really had an impact on me because there I was witnessing the great controversy out front and center, just right there. And I'm sure that we weren't the only two praying. I'm sure our voices rose with others who was praying together. Our prayers ascended up to God, and God moved. You know, I wonder what would have happened if no one had prayed. This is the very last day, the day that we were leaving, or the day before we left. I can't remember exactly when, but this was the very last Sabbath, so it was the day before we left. It is written, gave out Bibles. And this is a gentleman who had received his very first Bible ever. And I just happened to be able to get that picture. And I thought, how do I treat my Bible? How do I treat the Word of God? So this trip has impacted my life, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to share it with you all because it made me go back and reread my journals and be revived. Thank you.
Okay, so for you, those of you that go to church here, you know I'm Dolly, and I usually do the Christmas banquet, and you know that I can hardly get up front here and ask people to sign up to come to the Christmas banquet and not get teary. So, I brought something tonight. I'm putting these up here. One of us is going to use them, either you or me, and I hope it's you. So, but this is an amazing amazing experience that I had, and I only hope that I can do it some kind of justice so you get a feel for what it's like to go and see people devote their life to telling about Jesus, to helping other people. I always wanted to go on a mission trip. You know, anybody that's known me for the last 10 years, I'm going on a mission trip. I'm going to go on a mission trip. And, you know, something always, well, I can't go right now, you know. Well, I can't get off work right now, this and this. And then I ran into Dr. Gordon Guild, and he says, you need to go on a mission trip with me. I said, yeah, I know I do, Gordon. And then I met Eve, and Eve said, we're going to Mongolia. And this was the trip last year. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I ended up having eye surgery. And I couldn't travel out of the country for a period of time, so it didn't happen. So I'm like, well, maybe I'm not going on a mission trip. But it was still there. And then I started to think, am I wanting to go on a mission trip for the right reasons? Am I wanting to go just because I can say I did a mission trip because, boy, that was exciting. Boy, I had a good time. Was I going for the right reasons? And I struggled with this, even after I had verbally made a commitment that I would do this. When I had financially made a commitment that I would do this, I struggled harder. I prayed. I prayed that God would help me find and show me the right reasons to go. Well, It Is Written is very organized, and they made available to us a way that people could could write stories and just kind of let people know who they were, where they were from, that kind of thing. And one night I was on the computer, and I was looking at some of these stories. And a young man from Florida wrote this. And it's from Romans 10, 14, and 15. Now, I took this out of the Living Bible because that's what he had it on there, I believe. But, you know, it's going to be the same. But listen to these words. How can anyone call on God if he doesn't believe that he exists? How can anyone put his faith in Christ if he's never even heard about him? And how can they hear about him if no one tells them? And how can they preach to others unless they are sent? That's why the scripture says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring us good news from the Lord and tell us about his plan of salvation. When I read that night, I knew I was going for the right reasons. And my prayer change then was, I'm going for the right reasons to help me, Lord, to find who you want me to find and give me the words to say to them. So I'm going to approach this a little differently. I'd like to tell you what maybe it's like from the point of someone who goes and what you feel and what you learn out of the situation. So let's go to Mongolia. This is the other big challenge, is me working this thing. Now, I can't see that far. That's the other challenge, I can't see anything. You know, it's interesting because I don't think it's a bad thing to say that God has a sense of humor. And boy, you know, he let me know that pretty quickly in Mongolia. And I'll tell you how. Two things I just kind of had to chuckle at. If you've ever been in Sabbath school class with me, you know I don't say anything. I might say the wrong thing. I might say something silly. I don't talk much in Sabbath school class. So our first Sabbath in Mongolia, we go to this small church, and it's a cute little church, and the people are waiting outside for us. They are so excited to see us come. And they do their Sabbath school a little differently. They divide into groups, and each little group talks about Sunday's lessons, same quarterly as ours, Monday's lessons, Tuesday, so on and so forth. And then at the end, they have one member from each little group get up and teach a little bit about what they had talked about, what they gleaned from the lesson. And there were interpreters there. And, you know, you don't know the language, and sometimes you don't know what you're getting into. And so this interpreter came over, he's talking to this Mongolian lady, you know, and they're talking back and forth, and all of a sudden she's patting me on the leg and she's smiling at me, and she says, you, and I'm like, oh, okay, me, okay. I didn't know that I just got elected to help teach the Sabbath school lesson. So, don't get any ideas. So, you know, I just had to chuckle. I said, Lord, you will have your way, and you will teach me, and thank you for bringing me here. The other thing is, I'm with It Is Written. It Is Written is a Seventh-day Adventist entity. So we all have roommates, and I had a roommate from California, and I was excited to be with her because she had done plant-based studies, and we were going to just talk about recipes whenever we had a chance. They changed my roommate when I got to Mongolia. And it was a lady from Texas, and you know, that's okay. I mean, you know, I can read a cookbook. So we were chatting, and you know, I try to read a little from I'm in Patriarchs and Prophets right now. And I would read a little bit before I go to bed, you know, and we would talk and things. And have you ever read in Mrs. White's writing where she says this and this and this, you know, and we're talking, and one day she said to me, who's Mrs. White? I'm like, well, I said, because I'm just thinking, how come she doesn't know who Mrs. White is? And then I said to her, Irene, I said, do you believe in the second coming of Jesus? And she says, oh, yes, Dolly. She says, I do. She says, most of us in the Catholic faith do. I'm like, you know, that maybe was something that It Is Written should have told me before I go spewing off about Mrs. White, but we had a wonderful time. And actually, I'm not sure that It Is Written even knew it, come to think of it, but she was. She was a lovely woman of the Catholic faith, and we had many good talks for the rest of the time, and we ended up going on to China together, and we roomed together there too. So I said, you know, because I had been praying to somebody to witness to. I just didn't expect it to be one of our own people that came on the trip. Another thing I learned is I was very humbled by how I thought that I understood and I appreciated the things that we have in this country. I didn't. It's when you see how little someone else has, that's when you appreciate what you have. And this picture, I traveled with the gynecologist. She was from Ohio, and we traveled with the vision team, who they went place to place every day. So we weren't stationary in one place any day at all. So we carried our bags and went. And the first place that we went to was a place called Small City. And it sits on the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar. And Ulaanbaatar could be, parts of it could be New York City, for as big as the buildings are and all this and that. And a few miles out, this is what you see. And this is the first place we went. We went in a bus. There are not roads to speak of in Little City. You just hope and pray. And there were times that the people on the bus from Mongolia would get out and they would move electric wires so we could drive through. So that's a part of it. That in the background in the mountain there, what you're seeing, that's houses. This is the road. This is one of the main roads through Small City. This is some of the houses that you see. I mean, you have everything from somewhat of a house to, they call I call it a yurt, they call it a ger over there, a tent-like kind of structure, and they live in that. And then other things are just whatever people can throw together and put 4 walls up, and that's where they live. This is more of it. You can see all that mishmash kind of thing you see in the background. That is just houses where people live. This is what their city is like. There you can see some of the years. This is not a field in Little City. This is the main road. and the cattle just wander around. They wander around between the houses. They wander around the road. They wander wherever they want to. Another thing that I learned is I've always worked in a hospital. And if we don't have 5 bottles of Zofran, we think that that's a drug we use for nausea. If we don't have 5 bottles of that on hand, we're in a panic. Somebody better order some. I learned that in Mongolia, you wouldn't even see Zofran, for one thing. This is in a little building there in a small city. It's our first day because I traveled with the gynecologist. We had some privacy issues that usually you didn't have to think so much about. So I'm sewing a curtain together so we can give these ladies some kind of privacy. One day we went to a place and we have exam tables. Only this table only had 3½ legs. And it had a half a leg for the 4th leg, but the gentleman from the little area there from the church, they came in and they took like a 5-gallon, 10-gallon, whatever bucket, and they turned it over and they duct taped the half leg to the bucket. And that's what we used for the 4th leg. It went pretty well until sometime in the afternoon, and from ladies sliding on and off the table, we did not realize that the duct tape was giving way. And one lady got on and the duct tape and the bucket just went away. And we nearly dumped this poor lady having a GYN exam out into the optometry part of the but we grabbed her and she didn't fall and she laughed as hard as we did. She was wonderful. So we duct taped and we went on. It was a challenge getting to these places, I mean, because we had to carry all our equipment with us. They're big, big duffel bags that you carry this stuff with. The optometry people have more stuff than we have even. We're all on a bus and we look like, you remember the old show, The Beverly Hillbillies? We gave new meaning to Beverly Hillbillies, believe me. But you really, you learn to appreciate what you had. Elizabeth, that was the gynecologist, and myself, we look and we have, well, we must have 100 of the blue pads you use in the hospitals. We're using them like crazy. And about halfway through the first day, we said, maybe we should just use 1 per patient. By the end of the week, we were down to cutting them up into quarters, because there's nobody that's going to, you can't call Central Supply and get 100 more. It's not like that in Mongolia. I think sometimes even here in America, probably more here in America, we want answers to our big prayers. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes the answers to the small prayers are the ones that make the most impression in our lives and in the people that we interact with. We would always pray for safety, and that's a huge thing to pray for, because when you get in a bus or you walk the streets in Ulaanbaatar, you better pray for your safety. The first day we got there, we had several doctors that brought their small children. I was amazed, but those kids were good as gold. But they said, don't let your children go to the bathroom alone. They might fall in. They said, be very careful when you're walking on the streets of Ulaanbaatar, because a lot of times the manhole covers aren't secure and many of them are missing. So you learn quickly that you walk around the city looking down. One day I almost walked into a camel on the street because I was doing that, but I was not going to fall in a manhole. Anybody that knows anything about women's health, you know there's certain pieces of equipment you need to do a GYN exam. Now it's an interesting thing because you can buy this piece of equipment in pharmacies, what they call their pharmacies in Mongolia, but you can only buy so many at a time. I never thought the prayer that I would be praying in Mongolia each morning is, Lord, please send us speculums for today. I just really expected to be praying for something different. But I would say most mornings after the first or second morning when we had a good supply, we would get together, Elizabeth and the translator and myself, and we would literally pray that we didn't run out of speculums for the day. And I can tell you that every single day, when we would get down to, somebody would come before we take the first patient, I have speculums for you. Every single day, before they ran out, usually, and it's funny because usually it was when we had 2 left, somebody would come in the building and they would have an armful of speculums for us. God never failed us, never failed us. The eye people, and the eye people are always tremendously busy. I mean, they always see more patients than anyone else. And they have this piece of equipment, and they use it to help do refractions. And this equipment would overheated on them all the time. They'd have to shut it off, let it cool down, boot it back up. They get to see maybe 1 or 2 patients. They have 50, 60 patients waiting in a line. And you know, they had no choice but to wait till it cooled down. They did what they could mechanically. You know, these guys are good. They know how to work on these machines, optometry machines and things, but nothing worked. And literally one day they got together and they prayed over this refraction machine. They literally laid hands on it and prayed over it. I have to tell you, it never broke down again. They would have to reboot it maybe 1 time a day, but it wasn't after every couple patients, and it never altogether broke down again. And it was a miracle to me. Again, not the miracle that I was expecting I'd see, but you know, any miracle builds your faith. I found that out. This is just another, this is where we held shop also in Ulaanbaatar. We really did not, or in Small City, we really were not sewing, but they must have had some kind of cottage industry there, but that was the only table, that was the only place we had to put all our medicines we were using for the day, all our equipment, that sort of thing. It was all, you just made do with what you had. This was our sink in one of the areas. I'm not sure why it had a faucet because no water came out of it. You can see that red thing there with the little hose. They just fill that with water, and just, you know, by moving the hose back and forth, that's how the water comes out. That's what we use to wash our hands. And this is a man that was at one of the places that we visited, and I met some people from Florida that had gone before, and they told me that whenever the It Is Written comes, he's the first one there in the morning. He'll do whatever they need done. You want him to run for something, that's what he'll do. You want him to do crowd control, that's what he'll do. He'll hug anybody. He's the official hugger and the official greeter at that facility there. And I was introduced to him, and I mean, he treated me like he had known me his whole life. He just wanted to hug me, and he smiled. He would only smile, though, when you weren't taking his picture, because he had no teeth, and he wouldn't smile for the picture. But any other time when there wasn't a camera around, he had this great big smile. This is what he looked at like when I would see him at the meetings in the evening. I'm sure it's probably the only jacket that he had, but he was always cleaned up. He would always look for me when I came to the meetings at night, and he would always come over and give me a hug. I'll have another little story about him later. He was just such a nice lady, or a nice gentleman. Denise talked about the eye clinic, and like I said, they're always the busiest. And one day, they gave a lady her glasses, and this was a Small City. She went outside on the porch, and she just stood there, and she just looked. She didn't say anything, but she had a big smile on her face. And I looked at the same thing she looked at. And what she saw was the beauty that God had created around her, and she saw that was the main thing she didn't see before. She didn't see all those houses that I had seen. What to me was like, I don't want to look at this. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel selfish over what I had at home. It was the most beautiful sight in the world to her. There was a little girl that came, and they found out she had very bad eyes, and they fitted her with glasses, and her reaction was different. She went outside, and she had the biggest smile on her face, and she just took off running. And she came back in a short time with 4 or 5 of her little girlfriends because she wanted them all to have glasses too. Now, they didn't need glasses, but they carried some sunglasses. By the way, we carried 2,000 pairs of glasses over to Mongolia. And I think 2 tons of vitamins, I'm not sure. But she was so happy. You know, she could see, and she wanted her friends to share that. The other thing she wanted them to share is she brought her 5 little girlfriends to the meeting that night. She was 5. What do we do? You know, we would pray with the, this is Cheska. She was our interpreter. That's her mother with her and her little girl. Cheska is, her husband is a pastor, some like 250 miles from Ulaanbaatar, but she took a bus to come and translate. And she was with Elizabeth and I the first day, and the second day she was there again. We said, Cheska, you're back. And she said, I asked him if I could stay with you all week. And she was just a delight. She was a beautiful girl inside and out. And it's one thing to be an interpreter. It's another thing to not be a medical person and have to interpret all this medical language that she needed to gather from these patients before the gynecologist would see them. And she did just a terrific job. And, you know, I just, her and I ate together at the banquet the night before we came home and spent time together. She just was a wonderful person. We prayed with the patients. We would always be respectful. We would ask them, they want us to pray with them. Not one ever said no. No one ever said no. And I found another thing. I learned that it doesn't matter if we live in this country where we have plenty, if you're in Mongolia where they have most people very little, it doesn't matter where you live. We are all the same. We pray for our families and we pray for health. And that is the 2 things that most people would ask us to pray for them. I learned that I'm more than a nurse. During that week, I became the pharmacist, the cleanup girl, the registrar, the peacekeeper, and sometimes the bouncer. Because you have 30 people waiting for you, and at some point in that day, around 4 o'clock, the bus is going to come, and they're going to say, you need to get back on the bus to go back to the hotel, or you're going to find yourself walking back. And so sometimes we had 7, 8 people. We got down that far, but they had waited all day, and it was hot. Somebody had to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't see you. We don't have any more time. And poor Cheska says, I'm afraid to go out there. And I said, I'll go with you, Cheska. I said, I'll tell you what to say, but I can't say it. So Cheska and I started out on our own there. And I thought before I went out, because we gave everybody vitamins. There's a great need for that. So I stuck some bags of vitamins in my pockets. And I quickly found out they're loving people. They like your attention. And for them, it was almost like, okay, so you didn't see me. As long as I had my pack of vitamins to give them. They just wanted something. They wanted some evidence that somebody cared about them, that somebody cared they were there. And then we would say, now we'll be at such and such place tomorrow. We'll be there. And sure enough, most times they would be the first ones in line. And I know sometimes they came very early in the morning. I don't know, it was just, it was amazing to me. If that happened here in these states, I don't have to tell you what it would be like. The other thing that I learned is that people that go on these types of things, the doctors, the optometrists, the ophthalmologists, they are the most dedicated group of people that I have ever had the privilege to spend time with and to work with. I think if you would have left them, they would have stayed 19 hours a day. The clerk at our hotel, he was there day and night while we were there, literally, because the only other person that spoke English had gone on their honeymoon, so he had to be there. And he would see us come and go, and everybody would talk to him, and he was very engaging, and he always had a smile. And he knew there were dentists, and at some point in time, he mentioned that he had never been to a dentist. And they were like, well, not to worry about that. When we come tonight, just come up to Dr. Ho's room. He'll take care of it. And so they did. They took him up and found out he had some very bad teeth, and they just pulled them right there, done. And then he mentioned that nobody in his family had ever been to a dentist. Well, bring them over. So they all came, and they saw him, all the family too. And there was never like, nah, we're off duty, can't do it. I went to the meeting one night, and I saw one of the optometrists examining a woman's eyes outside in the vestibule. And I'm like, well, you know, that's what had to be done. One of the officials from Mongolia, whose mother-in-law, I think it was, had some eye problems, and apparently was told there wasn't much to do. They said, bring her to the hotel. They saw her at the hotel after the clinics were done. Very, very dedicated people, and every day on the way back from wherever we were on our bus, we would talk about, you know, just the answers to prayers that we had that day. There is another young woman that we saw, but we're going to talk about her in a little bit, and it really is quite a story. They did take us one day on some tours, and it was fascinating. We went out in the country, and there's this huge, huge statue. If you want to see it, I have it in my phone, and it's of their explorer, Genghis Khan, and you can't believe how big this is. But the traffic is so bad, and we're all on this bus, and our group felt really good because we had John Bradshaw and his son on our bus to go on our tour with us. And so we're driving out there, and this bus driver is pulled out into the left-hand lane, and that wouldn't be so bad except there were many cars coming at us, and he shows no signs of getting back into the right-hand lane. And the other cars are running off the road, and John Bradshaw was sitting in the back of me, and he made the comment, he says, if I get back safely tonight and alive, I will be preaching on the state of the dead. So the week, you know, in a spiritual sense, culminated with the baptism on Sabbath. The baptism was really something to behold, literally. They took us there on some buses. We were not the only buses there. And it struck me, how many times do we see busloads of people coming to see a baptism here in this country? They did. We walked over rock, which was actually the riverbed, but the water level was so low, they actually had a hard time finding a place to baptize people. But you can see the river there in the back, the crowd gathered, and so on and so forth. It was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you about it, but if you have never been to, for lack of a better term, mass baptism, it's a very, very moving thing to see 8 or 9 pastors in the water baptizing people into Jesus. It was an incredible experience to see. What was a more incredible experience to me, I guess, or just as much, is this. I don't know why, but this really, really touched my heart. After all the baptismal candidates had left the water, all the pastors that did baptizing, 2 of which that we have here with us tonight, they gathered in a circle and they prayed for these people. If we had that spirit that they had there, and how I know their hearts overfilled with the love for these people, not only would our world be different, but we would see Jesus much sooner. The one thing I said you would see that man later, or I'd tell you a story about him later. He found me at the baptism, and he came running up to me. And I'm sure he realized, we were going to leave the next day and stuff. And I thought that he came to give me a goodbye hug. And he had a bag in his arm. And he started rooting in his bag. And I stood there waiting, and I just kept standing there waiting for him. And he's rooting in his bag, and then he went in his bag and got something else. And what he pulled out was the Bible that he had gotten from It Is Written, and a pen. What he wanted me to do was sign his Bible. I can't tell you why, but I found that very touching too. And I hope I can meet him in heaven and tell him how much that meant to me. We had worship every morning at 6 a.m., 6:30, in the hallway on each floor of our hotel. And Dr. Ho, the dentist, he had the worship one morning, and I tried to find this in the devotional that he had, and I couldn't find it, but he read a story about John Wesley. And John Wesley, many of you probably know, he did come to America to do some mission work at one period in his career. And it talks about that, but what the last couple of the sentences were is what stuck with me and struck me. At the end of the devotional, John Wesley had these words to say. He says, "I went to the mission fields to convert souls to Christ. The souls were not the ones that needed to be converted. It was me." And I really, I think that we do a wonderful thing for people when we go to do medical missions and evangelism. I think a lot of times it does as much for us.
I guess we can close there. We can make a call and say who wants to go on the next mission trip. Dr. Gill, do you want to come up and, yeah, I'll put a picture up here for you. Dr. Gill was one of those doctors that was going out and sharing night after night after night, and he didn't always get to enjoy all the meetings at the night. Share a little bit about this story here, would you?
All right, sure. I came here tonight to listen. Can you hear me all right? But Dolly, yeah, I need the Kleenex too. Dolly kind of buttonholed me here, and so did Pastor Dale. So mission trips have been a vital part of the life in our family, and going around the world doing mission trips is really something special. And I really appreciate the It Is Written and their approach, because the approach in mission fields, sometimes we do a mission trip, we go in, do some medical work, and then turn around and leave, and that's the end of it. But not with It Is Written. They plan ahead of time. This was a 3 years, this was in planning. I was to Mongolia twice before I even got there for the final wrap-up here. And so what they do is they follow Jesus' plan. Take care of the physical, your emotional, and then your spiritual. That sequence, and that's what's so important. If a person comes in my office and they're having chest pain, and I say, boy, would you like to hear about Jesus? And what would it be like to, follow Jesus? What's he going to say to me? Get out of here, right? He's not even listen to me. If I take care of his pain, his chest pain, and get over his chest pain, have a little prayer with him, then I've opened the door to spiritual things. And the most important thing on this earth is not our physical well-being, because life on this earth is short, but eternity is forever. So it's the spiritual life that's so important. And at one of our meetings, we'd have our clinics all during the daytime, as Dolly said to you, and then we'd come back and we'd get prepared for John's wrap-up meetings in the big auditorium there in Ulaanbaatar. And it was, I think, the second to last meeting, somebody came and tapped on my shoulder and said, "We need you to go to and make a house call." Well, house calls that's my bag. I love doing house calls. I did it in my practice for many, many years, and I'm doing house calls now almost every day. So I said, sure, what do you need? He said, well, we want you to go to this house, this apartment, and see this lady and pray for her. I said, well, that's fine. So the meeting was about to start, so I thought, well, you got an interpreter for me. I have to have an interpreter because I don't speak Mongolian. You will have an interpreter for you, and here's the taxi driver or the bus or car driver right here for you, and he'll take you to this apartment here in Ulaanbaatar. So I said, Dolly was close by. I said, Dolly, you want to do a house call with me? It's always nice to have a nurse along with you, you know. And so she said, yeah, I'll do that. So I said, you'll have to skip the meeting though. We'll have to pass on here and Pastor Bradshaw speak. And she said, well, I guess I can do that. So we said, fine. And I grabbed my doctor bag and off we went and through this town of Ulaanbaatar. And like they said, it's a city of 1.5 million people. Got in these little back streets, back roads, and there's apartments, high-rise apartments, and kids playing in the street, you know, because that's the only place for them to play. And it was getting kind of grungy, and but boy, we were kind of in the slums here almost. And we come to this high-rise apartment, and the doors are all locked, and you have to have a special code to get in. But our driver, he knew the code, and he could hit the code, and they released the lock, and so we were able to enter this thing. And then we climbed, I think, six levels of stairs. We went up. They did have an elevator there. It was this little skinny elevator, held about 3 people. But we thought we'd better take the stairs. So we went up this stairs and in this little apartment. And here in this apartment was a mother. And I think you see a picture up here. The daughter laying there on the bed. And then the patient's 3-month-old daughter. And so the reason why they wanted me to come to see her and do a little physical checkup for her, but also to pray for her, because they knew that she was probably going to die pretty soon. And I know it's a little hard for you to see in the picture, but you notice on the left side of her neck, you see the white dressing there, and on the right side of her neck, you see the dressing. The left side of the neck, you can't really see it, but there's 2 big masses on each side of her neck, about the size of my fist. Cancer, okay? Cancer of the neck. And so this lady was really in a dying mode, and I never expected to do a hospice call on a mission trip. And so the important thing was I did a little physical exam, talked to the family and talked to her, and she was still smiling. And what we really wanted to do was to pray with her and see if she would commit her life to Jesus. So it's interesting how things work. But 3 years ago, here in Chattanooga, I was teaching nursing students anatomy and physiology at one of our colleges here, and the Gideons came and they had a whole bunch of little Bibles, and I think you're familiar with the little Gideon Bibles, these little white New Testament Bibles. And I said to the fellow, "You got some extra ones of those? I could maybe use some of those along the way." And he said, "Yeah." So he gave me a few of them, so I just took them home, set them on my shelf. And before I went on this mission trip, I thought, wow, I had to throw those things in my bag. Maybe there's somebody that could use one of those little Bibles, even though it's in English. They like, when you go to these countries, they like to see English things, and they like to have people help them to read those things and so on. So I threw the New Testament in my bag and had it in my doctor's bag. And we went to this home, and here she was laying there. And when I looked at her, I knew life was very short. I didn't know how many more weeks she had left. The doctors had said there's nothing more we can do. She'd seen some chemotherapy, and radiation therapy was not a alternative for her. So it was just a matter of sending her home and letting her die at home, and the family were nicely caring for her, and a 3-month-old daughter there with her. And so I talked to her about spiritual things, and I read to her, took a little Bible, and I read to her John 3:16. And she seemed to understand English quite well. I didn't know how well she could speak English. And so when I got through that little spiritual emphasis, I talked about Jesus. I gave her actually a 5-minute, little Bible history. I went back to creation, how God had created the earth. He rested on the 7th day, the Sabbath day. He blessed it and hallowed it. And he wanted us to follow his example. He had a home prepared for us, had a mansion prepared for us, and all we had to do was give our hearts to God, and he would take care of things. So we went through that and quite nicely, and she was very attentive, listened to it. And I had the little Bible, and I underlined in the Bible John 3:16 for her, and I handed it to her, and she took the little Bible. You'll see it in her hands there, on her tummy. And then I said to her, "Do you accept Jesus?" And here's the surprise. In perfect English, she said to me, "I accept Jesus Christ as my Savior." You see, I need this Kleenex more than Dolly does. I couldn't believe it. I accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. I was blown away. I said to myself, of all the patients I've seen in all my mission trips, if I'd only seen this one, mission would have been completed. So we prayed with her again, left her the little Bible, and the next night I went back again and visited her one more time, talked to the family again, had prayer with her again, and I could see she was at peace. And so that's the little mission story, but that's what missions are all about. So our physical lives are important, but what's most important is our spiritual lives. So each day when you get up, folks, just pray that God will preserve your spiritual life for that day, not only your physical life, but give you the opportunity to come in contact with somebody else. And God just opens doors every day. He'll open doors in just unusual ways, that you heard some of Dolly's stories here. And there's just so many more mission stories that we can tell you. But God is a great God. He's a loving God. And even though this little girl will die, she'll die peacefully. And it'll just be like just a sleep. And I explained to her what sleep was all about. He says, when you wake, you're going to see the face of Jesus. It's going to be beautiful.
Around now. I had a few things I was going to say, and then John had some things that he was going to say, but yeah, I don't think I can say all of them. I want to, Cheryl and I were wondering what we were going to do with It Is Written when they were looking for medical teams, because neither Cheryl or I are medical people. And so I kept asking them, are you sure you want us to go? Are you sure you want us to go? And they kept assuring us they wanted us to go. We went, and we went to, ended up in the Evergreen Hotel. And there was about 45 of us there. And the first morning for breakfast, it was some bread and peanut butter and oats or something like that. And Cheryl wasn't satisfied with breakfast, and so she went and talked with individuals and found out that the restaurant had moved out before we got there, and there was nobody to. So Cheryl volunteered to cook breakfast for our hotel every morning, and it was okay. We were jet lagged, so we were up at 4 a.m., so we cooked breakfast every morning. So it was good that we had something to do there, because I didn't get to preach the nightly meetings like I was used to doing, and or even hosting people like I was used to doing, but I got to make breakfast for the teams. And it was enjoyable to make breakfast. We went to this was our medical team that went out to this little church area, and Dolly worked as a bouncer, and Cheryl worked as a bouncer at our place. So they got to organize the group, and Cheryl was always telling people what to do, and sometimes the people would say, well, why do we have to do that? And the translator would say, because this white woman says so. So Cheryl and I did a lot of counseling there with our group, talking with the people and counseling with them, showing the Jesus video with them. I gave some health talks while people were waiting. I wanted to share with you some things that are going on in the future. They bought this piece of property there, and that looks like a pretty nice piece of property, doesn't it? That is their Cahutta Springs, where they are going to put a youth camp and have camp meeting and have a Cahutta Springs. This building in front of it right now, that part to the right that you see, is built out of shipping containers. Shipping containers. That's the shipping containers on the other side. We'll back up here just a second, I think. Right there where that bricks are, they would like to put a children's playground. And our group from Chattanooga First decided we wanted to help them put a children's playground there. So some of the monies that we took have been collecting here at our church. We donated for that, $500, but it was going to cost $2,500 to put a playground there. And I said, well, I'll let people know that we'll try and help you get a playground there. So we're going to take up an offering, and part of that money is going to go for the children's playground there. This is another part of the dormitory there, that building. Inside of it, our Georgia Cumberland Conference went there and had the first Pathfinder camporee there at that facility. First Mongolian Pathfinder camporee there on that property. And our Pathfinder groups that went from Georgia Cumberland say this was a pretty nice building to have it in. I just had to put that in there so you could see what the restrooms look like. That's the inside of the storage container building. That's a gymnasium. Pretty nice facility that they have there. That's the kitchen, probably the nicest kitchen I've ever seen in Mongolia. That's the dining room. I guess another one of the churches there came to me afterwards and said, "Pastor, would you help us raise money for the curtains?" I said, "No, I've already pledged for the playground." So I guess different churches are trying to reach individuals to raise funds for different things to put in place there. But if you are interested in helping sponsor some of these things, we have some things in the table at the back that we're just asking for donations. We have some CD that has songs from the steps. These has hymns on there, but if you want to give a donation for that. For all the children that are here, we have some Mongolia magnets if you want to take one of those if you promise to pray for Mongolia. We have some Mongolian bowls. That would be what they eat breakfast out of. And we even have a little cashmere. There's a price tag in there. If you want to give it a third or whatever that price tag says, you can donate that for Mongolia. But there were some individuals that were going to come and take up an offering. If you want to donate in the offering and then take something out there on the table when you leave, you can do it that way as well. I'm going to ask if those that are taking up the offering, if they would come forward and take up the offering now. And while they're taking up the offering, we'll ask Elder Bradshaw to come up here and wrap things up.
Well, I hope you are encouraged and inspired, and I hope you're hopeful. I'm hoping that my slides will miraculously appear here in just a couple of minutes. It's only 25 to 9, and I've got 125 slides to show you. The sermon accompanying each one of them. No, it's nothing quite like that at all. I just got a few remarks, but I do need the pictures, and I'll blow through this in just a couple of moments. And it may be that the assistance of mi esposa is needed. It may be, and it may not be. So we'll see how that goes. I've been encouraged and inspired, and what's so interesting for me is seeing how mission trips affect the missionaries. We've talked of that, and you may have even seen that, but to see that in Mongolia was really something. A gentleman had never been to a dentist, and was he seen there in the vestibule of the meeting hall or some such thing? I got back to where we were staying. We were the fortunate ones. I won't say the blessed, but the fortunate ones. There were some of the real missionaries that were staying at the Evergreen Hotel, and that itself was a mission experience. We were staying just up the street at another place whose name I don't remember. It might have been the Zika virus hotel or the I don't know, something. It was slightly better. We did have breakfast. It was the same every day, but we were not complaining at all. We were truly the blessed ones. But it was there when I got back to the hotel one day, and our optometrist, Dr. Brad, MD of Greenville, just up the road and down the road, had been seeing people in the foyer of the hotel. What had happened was that part of our team had contacted someone who was a Supreme Court judge, I think it was, someone who was really very important in the city of Ulaanbaatar. And they'd provided him with vision care and his family members. And when he left, our optometrist started seeing one of the hotel staff, and then some more of the hotel staff. And if you understand anything about class-based societies, you imagine that a Supreme Court judge is kind of way up here where the air is thin, and a hotel worker is so far beneath him that he can't even be seen from way up there. And then he turned from the hotel employee to, you know, someone of very, very humble means, even more humble again. A hotel employee has job. This person may have been next to homeless. And our optometrist just kept going from person to person to person to person. Made no difference to him who he was. And after a while, when they were gone, the man working behind the counter at the hotel said, "Excuse me, I got something to ask you." "Yes." "You saw the Supreme Court judge?" "Yes." "And then you saw our staff?" "Yes." "And then you saw these other people?" Well, the optometrist didn't quite know what he was getting at. He said, "Well, why wouldn't I do that?" "Why would you do that? Medical people don't bother with the lowly people around here, yet you people are bothering with anyone, no matter their class or background. What makes you different?" It's a great question to be asked. What makes you different? And so sometimes the effect of your ministry reaches far beyond even the obvious and reaches to those who are watching on. Is it possible I could get a progress update? Melissa, did you go back there? Did you? I guess you did not. Spanish isn't as good as I thought. You might like to get back there and help. If not you, then me. I don't know. It's plugged in, but it could well be that my computer has a personality problem. So let's see about that. I want to show you a video. It's a very brief video. It's about 13 seconds long, but I'm thinking you haven't seen a video quite like this one. And I'd like to introduce you to a remarkable young man, at least on the screen. Before we are done tonight, you will be inspired and encouraged, rather, by the story of his short life so far. Chris, are you back there helping? Oh, you are. All right. We only have 3 people back there trying to get it going. Maybe we need more. I'm going to show you that Mongolia, something you already know perhaps, Mongolia is a harsh sort of environment. The city of Ulaanbaatar, as I mentioned before, was designed for 500,000 people. And now more than half of the country's population, or roughly half of the country's population, lives there. It's way too much. It means that many people in that city don't have running water. They walk often a long distance to get their water and wheel their water home, and they will do that even in the dead of winter, keeping in mind that Ulaanbaatar is the coldest capital city on the planet. Some genius planned it that Ulaanbaatar's power supply should come from coal-fired power stations, which wouldn't be the first city in the world to have that, except UB sits in a valley. And you can, if you're at a high place, even if not, you can look at the city and then look just a little that way and see the coal-fired power station. And then look a little bit further and you see a second coal-fired power station, which means that when the wind isn't blowing, but the coal residue, the smoke goes up into the air, it simply hovers in the air above Ulaanbaatar for a very long time. It's a pretty significant public health hazard, but there's nothing really to do that you can do about it except shift the power stations. And I don't think anybody has a burning desire to do that because, of course, there's a lot of cost involved. Ulaanbaatar, or Mongolia, was communist for many years. It's a very fascinating site on the side of a hill that talks about the time that the Soviet Union came into Mongolia and liberated the Mongolians. We would translate that word as invaded. I know there are nuances when it comes to talking about history and political history, but there are certainly some fascinating aspects of Mongolian history that makes it today an interesting place to do ministry. 2.5% of the population is Christian, which means that 97.5 people out of every 100 is not a Christian. Many of them are Buddhist of some kind, Tibetan Buddhist, or nothing. They describe themselves as having no particular religious persuasion, and when under the Soviet Union Christianity was stamped out, atheism reigned, many of the Buddhist monks were slaughtered. It's no surprise that today lots of people would be unreligious, I don't want to say irreligious, but unreligious. And I have had conversations with people asking them about Noah's Ark. Never heard of it. David and Goliath, never heard of them. Adam and Eve, no idea. Do you know what a Bible is? And this group of young people, they turned to their spokesperson. She had an idea. None of the others did. That's a fascinating context in which to do ministry. Our group was called from all points of the compass, some from West Virginia, some from California, some from Australia, some from New Zealand, many from the United States. We had a team from India. We had people who had come from countries which I should be able to remember, but I cannot. So we had folks coming in from really all around the world to participate in Mission Mongolia. And with a team of 120 plus, really a major impact was made. Maybe most significantly is the work that's going to continue in Mongolia. There is another Mongolia mission trip next year, smaller. Nothing like the scope of the one that happened this year. It will be smaller. And those mission trips to Mongolia will continue on an ongoing basis. The need continues, so we aren't going to pull the plug. There is a demand that as many people want to go. It's a sacrifice, but we all agree that those who go end up being more blessed even than those who do not. Interesting challenge that I didn't know we were going to encounter. In one place, one of the many sites, our team wondered why there weren't more people there, but word had got around that the doctors were coming. And so you're thinking, oh, people would flock, would they not? No, not in this place. One young fellow living in an orphanage discovered that there was a medical team some distance away at a church. So he got on the bus and conveyed himself, maybe the bus conveyed him actually, to the site. The kid had a problem with his ear, a ruptured eardrum some time ago. See, what had happened was he went to see a physician, as someone got him to a doctor. The doctor said, oh, your immune system isn't strong enough to deal with the treatment, so we're just not going to deal with you. Of course, that was a lie. But it is not untypical for doctors who, understandably, are important to just not want to bother with sick people or poor people. So if you're poor, you have this idea that a doctor just doesn't want to bother with you. Mostly, that idea is right in Mongolia. And so, when our team arrived, they wondered why there weren't more people. And that's because the people had heard that doctors were coming. And what that meant in their mind, in this one location, was, that's not for us. Isn't that an interesting hurdle to have to clear? The people, knowing that you're there, say, well, that's not for us because doctors don't bother with us. Now, we weren't there, of course, just to see the poor, but the poor were, I think, clearly the most needy and the most unlikely to get medical care. Once they discovered that this was a group of doctors who actually cared about them, that was life-changing. It was absolutely a new thing. And then, of course, the numbers picked up, and then we couldn't keep up with the demand, and so it went. Hey, back there, what do you think? Is it likely to work? Oh, keep talking. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying, that we don't know? You know, I'd hate to be going at 11:15 in the blessed hope that in just a moment the pictures are going to appear. So, you know, I'll tell you the story that I'm going to end with, and I'll drag it out ever so slightly. And if the pictures don't appear before the story ends, we'll just call it a night. We got together and met with a young man named Hossor, H-O-S-S-O-O, Hossor. He was 21 years old and had come into the church as a result of a previous, it is written, Mission Mongolia trip. As we met with him, we didn't really speak much to Hossor, but we spoke to his pastor. The reason Hossor was very interesting to us is because he received medical attention from an oral maxillofacial surgeon. It wasn't really terribly complex surgery. He was tongue-tied. His tongue was anchored to the base of his mouth. You know, your tongue is connected back there and you've got all that wiggle room. Not hoso. It was connected all the way along as though it had been zipped shut, zipped to the bottom of his mouth. Now, I don't know quite how much he had there, but I just imagine that presented a person with some difficulties. And one of the difficulties it presented Hosso with was that he could not speak. 21 years old and couldn't talk. So the surgery was performed, his tongue was liberated, and now the hope is that after some therapy, which would last 2 or 3 months, he'll get his voice back. By the way, just to back up, that young man who got on the bus, the kid, the orphan who rode the bus to the site, he was told he had the ear problem, nothing could help. Well, nothing could help. What was going to be involved in that was some pretty intense surgery, which it wasn't really likely he was ever going to get, until one of our missionaries said, we've got to do something to help this kid. And so they took it upon himself to arrange the necessary surgery. It will cost not an insignificant sum of money. And the medical missionary said to me, now I know why I came to Mongolia. Because of her intervention, this poor kid who was left to rot by the medical establishment is going to get his hearing back. That's wonderful. So, Hosso had surgery, and his tongue was freed. And after therapy, as I mentioned to you, we hope he's going to speak. It was interesting that as I spoke to the pastor said, and yes, tomorrow, someone that Hosso has witnessed to is going to be in the baptism. Now, I'd like you to think that through with me. How do you witness if you can't speak? I don't have the answer to that. I never could actually find out. I said, what? This kid, well, he's 21, this kid has witnessed to somebody and brought that person into the church? He said, oh, Pastor, not just one person. There are now 4 families in the church who are part of the church because of the witness of this young man. And I'm still trying to work that out. Here's a kid who couldn't talk, and as a result of his ministry, 4 families are in the church and in faith in Jesus today. So there are some questions that we need to ask ourselves, such as, what's our excuse? 4 families brought to faith in Christ by a young man who was literally speechless. So it makes us wonder what's wrong with us, or why we are not seeing a little more success. I know that Ulaanbaatar isn't Chattanooga, Mongolia is not Tennessee, I get it. But unable to speak is unable to speak. And this kid, not able to speak, has brought to faith in Jesus 4 families. Do you know why? So what now? Okay. I didn't hear that either, but that's okay. I'm going to try to not look frustrated. I'm going to try to look like it doesn't matter a bit to me that you don't get to see those slides. I made 2 slide presentations. I'm just going to be cool about it. And if you're wondering if secretly I'm just a tad disappointed, you don't really need to wonder. Ma'am, you're going to say something? Yeah, part B. Yeah, maybe. Well, anyway, I want to thank Pastor Tennell and, of course, Mrs. Tennell, and those of you here who participated. Thank you and thank you. I had some pictures of you. I certainly had some photographs of Dr. Guild I was going to show, but it was nothing incriminating. It was only just to show Dr. Guild in action. And I can tell you this. Dr. Guild has been with us on multiple mission trips. Dolly, is it only one so far? Okay, one so far. Those who go and serve make an enormous difference. They just do. An enormous difference. When we were in Moldova earlier this year, the individual that had the greatest impact of anyone serving in Moldova was not a pastor or a preacher, but it was Dr. Guild, our medical missionary. An enormous impact. Drawing people from the community, pointing people to Jesus, ministering to people in the name of Jesus Christ. So thank you, and others of you, man. It's too late for that. They've put it to rest. We prayed earlier, though. Their request was a prayer that would work. I would have liked you to have seen it as well, but it's done, and it's late. It would have only taken about 7 minutes, but it's done. So, but thank you, a kind suggestion. Anyhow, thank you to those of you involved. If you've contributed in some way to the work going on there, thank you. We're encouraged that it is written to work with the Mongolian mission. They're a good mission partner. Money doesn't disappear. People do what they say they're going to do. They organize things very, very well. And Mongolia is a particularly needy place. Another fascinating thing I might have added to you is that it appears that the door is kind of closing. That is, prosperity is increasing owing to a very strong mining industry there. People are moving to the city, which I guess makes them easier to find, but you find that in the countryside, people are just so open. When we were filming there 3 years ago, we were driving out in the country, and we were going to go and film with somebody in the countryside. And so they drove off the road, and we drove like this for a while, and we stopped at a man's house, and we got out, hey, we're here, good to see you, here's the camera, just go ahead and do your thing. When we were leaving, I said to the Mongolians, I said, who was that man anyway? And they said, oh, we don't know. You just needed somewhere to film, so we found a place, and we stopped and filmed. Had no idea that this was an unarranged appointment. A random stop. We thought we were going to someone that had contacted. Didn't work out that way. In the countryside, people are very, very gracious. In the city, the people are very nice, but they become cityfied really quickly. A little cynical, a little jaded, a lot more private, a little less open. So while that provides really some opportunities, it provides some challenges. And so we want to work in Mongolia while we still can. Anyhow, we shall pray. Sir. Oh, thanks. When the series was over, so from the inception of the project, people were being baptized along the way as they were being connected with the church and followed up with in Bible studies. The medical missionary sites were not all, but mostly held at churches, at Seventh-day Adventist churches. And the pastors will tell you it works so well to draw people from the community to the church because folks will come for that. One of our sites this last time around was a nursing home, rest home. You would not put grandma in there. You wouldn't. But by Mongolian standards, pretty good. It was a school, but a number of churches. So along the way, people have been connected and they're being followed up and so forth. At the end of the evangelistic series, I so wanted to show you some. Do we have you to thank for that? Oh, that's funny. At the end of the meeting, there was something like, and I'm not really remembering very well, I've heard varying numbers, but Jocelyn, do you know? It was around 100, might have been a little less than 100 who were baptized. Well, 72 who were baptized then at the meetings. But that's the meetings. You know, it was a short series of meetings, and what the people who were baptized were those who were being worked with along the way. Now, from the people who came to the meetings, there were, my recollection tells me, you may know, more than 200 people who made a decision to be baptized and are now being followed up by the churches on the ground there in Mongolia. So those folks, many of them came directly from medical missionary work. And really, that's how it ought to work. We minister in the community, we invite people to know Jesus, we share Jesus with them, we call for decisions, and we get decisions. Is this iron pyrite, or is this actually the real thing?
This is the real thing of the people that came forward
Okay.
when you made your altar call.
Oh.
And they were just rushing.
All right, because I had that picture too. There I was having a false hope. That's not my computer?
No.
All right, it's a picture of a baptism, and that's encouraging. Are you going to have the closing prayer?
There's another picture
Okay.
after this of the baptism.
Oh, which picture? I had the video. You have the video?
Go ahead to the next picture.
Man, I have the video. Oh, not this one. Oh, this one.
I have that picture.
Oh, good. You don't have the other picture.
I don't have the other.
I have to tell you about the video. When I baptize like this. I plant my foot and bend my knee. It's better for your back, right? It's better for your back. So I don't baptize like that because one day I'll do that and I'll never straighten up again. It's better for your back. Baptize like this. Bring him back up. The water was not much more than ankle deep. In fact, was it knee deep?
Where I was standing.
Oh, yeah, you're in the deep end. We're in the shallow end of the river. And so a lady was brought to me to be baptized. And the video is better than the commentary, but I'll just tell you, because you showed the baptism picture. And so, you know, I got her down to about here. You know, I mean, she had probably been lighter once, is what I'm guessing. And I got her down here, and I thought, that's a really long way to lower someone in this position. And the further I went, the more difficult it got. And the river bottom was just rocks. So it was slippery and so forth. So
it wasn't just
so
him.
it was a double baptism. I baptized her, and I went right in there with her, and she baptized me. So two of us were baptized. I would have liked to have shown you that. And
They didn't count that one.
oh, they didn't count that one. There was a rebaptism that day. Yeah, down she went, and up I went over too. And you can, on the video, you can hear the people, oh, look, oh, he's going in. Oh, look at that. Oh, my goodness. Phew. That's the first time that's happened. I wouldn't mind if it was the last. Anyway, Pastor, I'm sure you're going to have a closing prayer. Thanks for making this night possible.
Thanks to It Is Written for making this night possible. We had a good time with the evangelism there.
Thanks for coming along. You all made it a wonderful event. God is good.
It was a joy to be part of this with It Is Written. And it was a joy to have you as part of this. I'm going to let you know again, It Is Written is going back this next year. Quiet Hour is going back next year. They have a plan to plant 16 churches in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar within the next 5 years. So
There's a lot of work going on.
there's a lot of work going on.
Hey, just this one thing, if I may.
You may.
Talk about
We've got people still here. You may.
mission opportunities.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned this. Next year, It Is Written has mission opportunities in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, in Moldova, in Manila in the Philippines. It has been said that we want to take 500 preachers and medical missionaries to Manila. That's what's being said.
And Georgia Cumberland Conference is trying to send some of their pastors to go to that.
Very good, very good. As well as South Africa. Manila in, I think it's July, and South Africa in October. Mongolia and Moldova earlier in the year. So I wanted you to know about that in case you've been inspired and you'd like to be part of an It Is Written mission.
Dolly wants to sign up first, so the rest of them will have to get in line behind her.
We've already got her signed up.
There you go. We are glad you were here tonight. Hope that we can get Elder Bradshaw back to show his videos and give us an additional report at another time when we can get it working. I think Herb had an announcement he needed to make. Did Herb